So last month we made banana vinegar, and I think you remember I said this month we were actually going to learn how to do something with it. So I know people really like cultured foods, especially kimchi. So we're going to do a red cabbage kimchi with carrots, hot pepper, green onion, garlic, ginger, turmeric, some spices, black peppercorns and star anise. Black peppercorns are really nice in this. Salt. And here's our vinegar. Remember last month we put a tiny little piece of culture in there, so you guys can see what happens here over time. It's just like a SCOBY. Look at that. That tiny little culture that we put in there has turned into this great big vinegar mother. When it gets to this size, feel free to divide it and give it to a friend so they can make their own vinegar. And I also here have some just standard white distilled vinegar. Purely optional. I usually do half and half because I like to save my homemade vinegars for salad dressings and that fresh taste, not use it all for pickling. And so I'm going to do half white vinegar and half homemade vinegar for this kimchi pickle. So that's everything you need to prep. Oh, and don't forget you're going to need some jars. So here's some nice clean jars and their respective lids. And that's everything you need, and we'll get started. Okay. So, first thing we're just going to do is chop up our cabbage, and this process is called salting down. This is what old-timers would call salting down the goods. So, you want to chop your cabbage nice and thin. Be careful not to chop off your fingers. And if your quarters are a little big, you can cut them again in half. You don't have to make the pieces here super small, but it's up to you how small you want to make them. But you do have to make them small enough so that the salt and the vinegar and everything that we're using to pickle our cabbage is going to get all soaked in. Yeah, so I'm pretty rough and rustic about doing it here. But just you can also shred it if you like. I'm fine with just using a knife because it's a lot of trouble to start shredding it. So, yep, okay. Chop this up. Now, what you guys need to understand about preserving things, yeah? So we already know from last month's video that preserving things with vinegar is really great. Yeah, it's super easy and super tasty, and who doesn't love pickles? And it's also super effective because the key is, the food science behind this is that it's the acidity of the vinegar that is preventing any bacteria from growing in the food. Now, another super effective way to preserve food is brining. Brining is with salt. So like salted cod, jerkies, salting things down is another really, really good way to kill off any bad bacteria while allowing beneficial bacteria, the ones that are good for your gut biomes, to still proliferate, but killing off the bad ones that could hurt you. So what you do is between each layer of cabbage here, as you put it into your bowl, give it a generous sprinkle of salt. Don't chop it all up and then put it in the bowl and salt it. You want to make sure that you do each layer individually. And don't worry, not all this salt is going to stay on here. We're actually going to rinse and drain most of this off. But what we're doing is we're working, you can massage it a little bit like you would with a kale salad, is you really want to work it in there, work the salt into the cabbage, and it'll start effectively like cleaning it from the inside out, yeah? So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to create layers, and we're going to salt each layer down. So I'm just going to keep chopping here and adding on cabbage into the bowl, layer by layer. And then don't forget, right, you don't want to do too much so that you're not going to get each layer completely covered and penetrated with the salt, yeah? So that's enough. I'll add a little bit more salt. Massage it in. Yeah, and we'll just keep proceeding like that, okay? Okay. So once we have our cabbage all salted down and in the bowl, we're going to do the same thing here with our carrot. And again, if you're okay doing it with a knife, feel free to grab a grater And you can also grate it, but don't grate it up super, 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 super small. Then it'll just disappear into your pickle. You won't really get any good carrot flavor. So I like to do is just slice it very thin, like kind of matchstick it. Yeah, and then I'll slice all my matchsticks really thin as well. And that gives me like really the perfect size for it getting nice and pickled with all the salt and the vinegar and all the preservatives, natural preservatives penetrating into there, but not so much that that you totally lose the carrot, yeah? Because otherwise you just totally lose your good carrot flavor and your good carrot consistency. So I'm just going to cut nice thin matchsticks. And then my matchsticks, I just turn it crosswise and cut my matchsticks into chunks. And then same thing, guys. Once this is all in the bowl, make sure that you add again more salt. I know it seems like a lot of salt, but don't worry, it doesn't end up in the finished product, okay? What it's doing is it is starting that brining process. So massage and mix it in, and then once you have your carrot mixed in there, what you'll do is you want to cover it with a cloth or a lid, but not too tight because you want air to get in there. And let it sit anywhere for a couple of hours to literally a couple of days. People who like really, really stinky kimchi, they'll let it sit for a week. I'm not quite that extreme. I'll usually let it sit overnight, and it's so warm here that by the next morning it's definitely fermented and cultured. If your house is more cool, you might want to give it more like 24 to 48 hours. And if you don't want it cultured, if you just want to do pickled red cabbage, which is also great, you could start doing this in a couple, like maybe in an hour. But what we need to do is let the salt penetrate in here, and it's going to start to draw a lot of the moisture out of your vegetables. And it's going to turn into a very, very salty water on the bottom. And that's what you're going to drain off. That's where most of the salt is going to end up. But what it's done is it's started to preserve and take any harmful bacteria out of the food, draw it out, yeah? And then you're going to drain that off, okay? So I'm going to put a nice loose lid on this, and I'm going to let it sit for maybe overnight, and we'll come back to it tomorrow morning and go ahead and we'll pickle it, yeah? Okay, so we're back. We have a few more items to take into consideration. Colander, small strainer, garlic press, okay, and any kind of medium-sized pan, or pot, I should actually say, medium-sized pot. Make sure it's just a little bit deep, yeah? Okay. So if you guys have never pickled anything before, you're going to see that this is really, really, really easy, and you're probably going to get kind of addicted to it. My friend Christina was down here last year, and I showed her the first steps of pickling and preserving, and now she practically has like a store in her house and her closet. What I did while you guys, we were on break waiting for our salted down vegetables to get all nice and soft and all the salt to get into them, all I did in the meantime was I chopped up the pickle mix. Okay, so there it is. Really easy, okay? Just some minced up green onion, ginger, hot peppers, and I left the garlic cloves and the turmeric whole because I'm going to press those in last to get all the flavor. Okay? So, first thing you want to do is just drain off your liquid. There's a lot of liquid in here. It's all gathered in the bottom, and I just want to drain that off. So, I'm going to pour this over by the sink. Yep. Okay. Okay, and then I'm just going to let that continue to drain out a little bit here into this lid while I do the rest of the preparation. Now, this is super easy. So we've got our pan here, our pot, and you want to mix, like I said, let's do half and half white vinegar and homemade vinegar. And if you don't have a homemade vinegar, use a Bragg's apple cider vinegar or a good brand of a cider vinegar. That's really great too. You can even use all white distilled vinegar, but I just think the taste is like a little bit flat, and you get a better, richer flavor when you use a little bit of like a cider vinegar or a homemade vinegar. Don't ever worry about making too much pickle mix, because you can always cool it down and then add it with some olive oil and make a salad dressing out of it, and that's really, really good, okay? So don't ever worry about making too much. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pour in half white distilled vinegar, and then make sure if you have a homemade vinegar or a cider vinegar that has the mother in it, like Bragg's, that you pour it through a strainer, because you don't want to lose your mother. I mean, if she falls out, just take her and put her back in. It's not a big deal, but it's better not to just, you might as well just use a strainer. See, there she is in there. She's very nice mother, okay? Always leave enough homemade vinegar if you're going to almost empty out your jar. Always leave enough for your mother to sit in so that she doesn't dry out and not have anything to do, okay? So with this jar, really important, what I want to do with this is I want to start making a fermented juice. So if you have like apples or oranges or more bananas to mash up like we did last month, that would be great. Once you get down to this level of your jar of vinegar that the mother is just floating around in like less than an inch or two of liquid, start fermenting some juice. And then once the juice is fermented, put it back in here so that she has sugars to convert and she has things to do. When she doesn't have anything to do and she doesn't have anything to eat, she doesn't do as well, okay? Their vinegar mothers are like any other living thing. They need activity, they need food. Okay, so now we have our vinegar mix here, and then all we want to do with this is, well, let's throw our garlic in first. So garlic, I really like to press it to get all the flavor out of it. Yeah. How about this fancy thing that Juan made for me out of a tree branch? Isn't that cool? Okay. Up to you if you want to throw in the skin of the vinegar too. I always do. Waste not, want not. Yeah. More garlic flavor in the kimchi, the better. Yeah. Oh, the smell of fresh garlic is so good. We had kind of an eventful day today in the kitchen. We had a hummingbird stuck in here. And then we had a blue, one of those beautiful big blue morpho moths came in, and we let her out. And then she came back. I just kind of fluttered around. I guess she really just wanted to hang out with us today. It's nice when we get really beautiful animals in the kitchen when we're just hanging out, because believe me, there's no shortage of frogs in here either. So you take the good with the bad, yeah? Not that frogs are bad, but, they're just, I don't know. They're okay. Anyway, so, yeah, and I like to press the turmeric, too. See, isn't that cool? You can press turmeric and get that really fresh flavor. I had a question from one of my videos, is where can I buy fresh turmeric? Guys, look in Indian markets and in Asian markets. If you're in the DC area, like I know a lot of you guys are out in Falls Church, out there by the Eden Center, by the Vietnamese mafia. I guess I shouldn't say that, but oh well, too late. Yeah, out there, I know you can get fresh turmeric. I've bought it out there a couple of times by the storage locker place. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. And there's a Peruvian chicken place where you can get some lunch. And also get your fresh turmeric and dragon fruit and whatever other weird stuff you're going to get at the Asian market. Okay, so here we go. So I emptied everything into the vinegar mix. The green onion, the garlic, the ginger, and the hot peppers. I'm also going to throw in a couple little pieces of star anise and some large black peppercorns. This is optional, but I think it also gives the finished pickle a really, really nice, balanced, rich flavor. And also, a pretty good amount of salt. I know that our vegetables were salted, but remember, we're draining a lot of that off. And salt is the best preservative. Salt and vinegar combined. So I put in about 3 tablespoons of salt. Notice I don't really measure anything, guys. It's, you spend a lot of time in the kitchen, you just start eyeballing and getting an idea for how much flavor, you want. Okay, and then also we're going to put in a little bit of brown sugar. And it's not enough to really make it sweet, but it's enough to offset some of the saltiness and the acidity of the vinegar and just balance it out. I think there's a kind of like a famous thing going around right now on the cooking shows and the YouTube videos is like salt, acid, heat, fat. I think that's what it is, but I would like to add sweet in there. That if you really want to have a good balance of flavors, and if you're into Ayurveda and also balancing out your elements, having the right amount of salt, sweet, heat, and fat, and what was the other one? Yes, salt, sweet, heat, and fat. That will just make everything really nice and balanced. It's very good for your digestion to have all those elements combined and also in harmony, also balanced out. So here we go. So now what you're going to do with your pickle mix is we'll take this over to the stove, and you want to bring it up. We're going to bring it up to a boil, and then we're going to let it simmer for about 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to take this over, put it on the stove top, and then we'll go check it out in a little while. Okay, so here we are over by the stove. And as you can see, our pickle mixture has already come up to a boil, and now I've got it on a little bit of a simmer. And you just want it to simmer here for, like I said, about 10 minutes. Now, when I started cooking the pickle mix, oh my god, it smells so good. We had this visitor here, like maybe 2 years ago, this guy Jake from New York, and I was pickling, I was pickling some beets at the time, and he came over and he smelled this, and he's like, oh my god, the smell makes me start to salivate. And I was like, well, that's great. I mean, I like that my food makes people drool, but, like, please don't salivate in the pickle mix, yeah? Because the whole reason we're doing this is to try to create a sterile environment. So, at any rate, speaking of sterile environments, what we have here is when I started boiling up the pickle mix, I also put the jars in a pot of hot water, and I'm now bringing that up to a boil. This is really important, guys, okay? Because not only do we want the food to have an absence of any harmful bacteria, you also want the surfaces that the food is going to touch to have, well, I don't want to say to have an absence. That's kind of silly, right? That's like creating a negative out of two positives. Anyway, you want the food to not have any harmful bacteria. So what we're doing here is I'm boiling up the jars, okay? Don't bring the water to a boil and then put the jars in it. Let me repeat, don't bring the water to a boil and then put the jars in it, because if your jars are cool and the water is boiling hot, they're very likely to crack. Put the jars in the cool water and bring it all up to a boil together, okay? Once your jars come up to a boil for about 2 minutes, and then just put a lid on it and turn off the heat, and then keep your jars hot until you are completely ready to start pickling, which is what I will show you guys next. Yeah. Okay, so now the key to the final step of this process, and believe it or not, we're already at the final step, is to keep everything hot, okay? Hot jar, hot pickling, hot lid, okay? So I'm just going to grab the jars. How am I going to grab the jars? Guys, look, I live in the forest. I can't always show, like, the most, like, OSHA approved way to do everything. I just use a big, long wooden handle of a spoon to get the jars out of the hot water. If you have tongs, use tongs, okay? Don't burn yourself. I'm not going to show what I'm about to do because I don't want you to do it this way. I want you to get yourself a pair of tongs to lift the jars out of the water with. So, yeah, so pretend this isn't happening and pretend the OSHA safe way of doing it is happening. Yeah, one time our car broke down and we also got hauled like about probably 15 miles with a piece of bamboo connecting a pickup truck to our car with no brakes. And oh my God, it was like the scariest thing ever, but we made it. So anyway, not everything we do off the grid is as like awesome and safe as it is in the civilized, well, I don't want to say the civilized world, but anyway, the developed world, whatever. Okay, I'm going to get my jars. Hold on. So, okay, so the secret is keeping everything hot. Hot jar number one. I'm just lift it. What I'm doing, guys, is I'm putting the spoon handle in the jar and using it to lift them out. It's not really that terrifying. It's just, if you have tongs, it's a little better to use tongs. Okay, we make do out here, and we do amazing things with what we have, yeah? See, look, that's all I do, is I just take it out like that, out of the hot water, turn it upside down to get the water out of it. Leave the lids in the jars. Leave the lids in the jars. Leave the lid in the pot, the lids in the pot, to keep them hot until the last possible second, okay? So now we've got the hot jars. We've got our cabbage and our carrots here. Look at all the liquid that came out. See how I said how it would drain out a little bit? Okay, so there's the liquid that came out. And now you just want to start spooning your mix here into your jars. If your hands are clean, make sure your hands are clean. You can use your hands to help. I just washed my hands with hot soapy water, so I'm in good shape. And try to do this part fast. If a little bit, obviously, I'm dropping some of it, but it's okay. If some falls out on the sides, it's okay. Just let it go. Pack it down a little bit as you're going. You don't have to pack it in too tight, but pack it down a little bit. And then leave a little bit of space there at the top. Okay? Give yourself about 2 inches of space at the top. And then just immediately go and start packing in your next jar. You might be able to get those fancy ball jars. You know, mail order them or whatever, and then they'll all be the same size. And I just, as my jars empty out here from one pickle or preserve or marmalade or chutney or salsa or whatever it is that I've made, I just scrub them out and scrub them out really, 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 really good, and then boil them to sterilize them like I just showed you. And then I go ahead and I start my next batch. And if you have a little bit left over, just go ahead and, eat it. Put a little vinaigrette dressing on it, or you can saute it. I actually had more cabbage than what I used for this, and more carrot. So what I did is for lunch, I just made a really, really good saute of red cabbage and carrot and green pepper, and used a little banana vinegar and brown sugar and salt, and pretty much the same thing that's going in the pickle. Well, actually almost the exact same thing, because that's what I had ready. And then I caramelized it, and it was great. It made like a red cabbage bacon. I actually ended up making up a recipe out of it, okay? So, yeah, okay, so those are ready. Now, all you need to do is take your hot pickling. Notice I'm like a little hyper and everything really fast. I also just had a cup of coffee. Okay, take your hot pickling liquid. Oh, it smells so good. And pour your hot pickling liquid here into your jars. Let's move that a little bit, yeah. Make sure you leave a half an inch at the top. It doesn't have to be exactly half an inch. Like, don't get the ruler out, yeah? But leave about half an inch at the top. And that's called your headspace. And then that way, as things cool down, if there's any expansion, your jar doesn't blow up. Don't fill your jar all the way up to the top. And see, I have a little bit of leftover. And if I let this cool down and I mix it up with a little bit of olive oil or a nut oil, it makes a really, really delicious salad dressing or to top sauteed veggies with it. So don't worry if you have a little bit extra. That's fine. Okay? This one is a little bit over full. So I'm just going to put that in there. Oh my God, look at how colorful and beautiful that is, right? Live food, live colors. Oh my goodness, so beautiful, this food. It's just so beautiful. I just want to look at it. I mean, everything here, in the nature is just beautiful. I didn't mean to diss the frogs earlier. Like, this whole time that I was cooking up the pickling, I was feeling so bad about the frogs. I mean, of course frogs are as beautiful as butterflies and hummingbirds, and they have their place. Sometimes they just, they come in the house at night and they don't want to leave. They just hop around, bop, bop, bop. And poor Juan, the frogs are really crazy about him. They just have this affinity to Juan. One day he asked me, is there something on my back? Because he heard this like thwack. And I looked, and there was a frog just like on his back, just like hanging out. Or he'll go to sit in his chair to relax after like a really long, hard day. And there'll just be like a little teeny tiny, cute little adorable frog just in his chair looking at him with his buggy eyes. They leave me alone. I think they know that like I'm a little bit more serious about being left alone sometimes. But anyway, okay, so there's the deal with the frogs. So the frogs are really, they're cool, guys. They're awesome. They're totally necessary. They show us that our water is clean. They show us that we're doing a good job here when they're healthy and they proliferate. It means we're doing good, you know? So the frogs are good. Okay, so now all we want to do is grab our lids while they're still hot. And yeah, those are hot. Lid number 1. Okay, now, well, these lids, notice these are just like the lids that you get, like these old-fashioned Smucker's jelly lids. If you put, here's a secret. It's not a secret, so I'm going to tell you. If you put a hot lid on a hot jar that has hot liquid inside of it, it seals. Okay? So don't touch your jars because they're really hot. So adjust the lid on there. Don't squeeze too much because remember everything is very hot. But get the lid on there pretty tight, okay? And when you get a hot jar and a hot lid with a hot liquid inside, that's it. It's going to create a seal. This will make a good enough seal that if you're going to keep these, especially if you're keeping them in a nice, cool, dark place, they're easily going to keep for at least 6 months. If you want to keep them longer than that, the next step would be to take these jars, put them back in the hot water, make sure they're completely immersed, and boil them for another 10 minutes. What that does is it forces any remaining air that's left out in the jar, you'll see it come out in bubbles, and creates a vacuum airlock on your food. And that's like, you know, if you ever would go to your grandma's house or your great-grandma's house or great-aunt's house and she had like a whole closet full of preserves and they'd been in there since like God knows how long and they were still good, because that's what she did. That's called giving it a hot water bath. And that creates, like I said, a seal. This one, I'm not even using a lid that seals. This is just like a Nescafe instant coffee, like instant coffee, yeah, right? And because we're going to eat this one first. And look, it's got vinegar. And it's got salt, okay? So this is perfectly preserved as it is for at least a month or two, and we're going to eat it well before then, okay? So, and guys, I mean, it's kimchi. Like, it's supposed to be, you know, just a little bit. But you know what I'm saying is you don't want bad bacteria in there. You just want your good cultures, okay? So this one, it's not sealed. It's just got a regular lid on it, and this is fine, okay? I don't even have a refrigerator. I have no fridge. We eat these, like, we eat this all the time, pickled vegetables, okay? So, like this, being out of the refrigerator, easily, you know, 60 to 90 days, this is going to be good because it's in vinegar and it's in salt. If you have a refrigerator and you're refrigerating it, you can probably keep it indefinitely, okay? So, yeah. And then these guys we've made the seal with the hot liquid, the hot jar, and the hot lid. These will stay good for months and months, okay? And if, like I said, I'm going to put them in a nice, cool place. I know I don't have a fridge, but I do have cool places to store things out of the light and out of the sun. These will stay good for, you know, months and months. If I wanted to be like, you know, if I wanted to sell these, right? Like, say you want to sell them and you want to airlock them down. Just like I said, boil the jar for 10 minutes, just as it is, standing upright. And don't worry, I'll also do a lesson on this too, so you just know, you actually see a jar get boiled, or, you know, you can look it up online, how to give a jar a hot water bath, and then you know how to do that. And it's a really great skill, guys. It's really important, I think, to know how to preserve food. What if you get like a whole bunch of weird vegetables from the CSA, like, you know, crinkly cabbage or Napa cabbage, and they give you like a whole box of it and you don't know what to do? Pickle it, right? Like, why let things go bad? Why throw away produce? You know, throwing away produce is 40%. 40% of what goes into landfills outside of urban areas is thrown away food. Not just produce, but also obviously takeout and everything. But like, why throw it away? Why let it go bad when you can make amazing kimchis and pickles out of it? Yeah. So it's just really, it's a way to do your part. Not everybody can come out to the forest and plant, acres of trees, but we can all learn how to preserve farm fresh goodness when we have it. And hey, then, if the zombies do ever come, at least you got some food in the closet. Yeah? Okay. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Enjoy. And I'll see you next time with another awesome recipe.